Beneath the bruised, bleeding light of 3 dying suns, the Ethelgard arena maintained an absolute, suffocating silence. Carved from the living crystal of our homeworld, the architecture was designed to amplify the resonant frequencies of honorable combat, yet today it served only as a meticulously polished tomb. High Exarch Selene stood at the geometric center of the combat floor, her physical form radiating a desperate, brilliant white illumination that sought to push back the encroaching shadows. It was known in the old tongue as the Alpha, a suffocating mass of necrotic tissue, grafted metallic plating, and a predatory hunger that consumed light itself. It had not come to duel. It had come to feed. Against the crystalline perfection of the spectator tears, a jarring, ugly rhythm intruded upon the sacred silence. Clink, drag, clink. A mammalian biped wrapped in soiled thermal fabrics repeatedly struck a rusted titanium breaker bar against the pristine ancestral stone of his seat. He was a human deserter named Silas Vane, a piece of kinetic scrap we had pitted and allowed to linger in our lower atmospheric sectors. His presence was an insult to the ritual, but the adjudicators lacked the necessary security personnel to remove him, as every capable guard was currently preparing for the inevitable end of our species. Far above the open apex of the arena dome, a deep, subsonic vibration continually disturbed the atmospheric containment field. The meteorological sensors classified the low rumble as a symptom of our dying suns shedding their final magnetic storms, a minor atmospheric anomaly that barely registered against the overwhelming dread of the ground-level execution. I will confess this now, before the archival records are permanently etched into the crystal lattices. If we had obeyed our own sacred laws during that cycle, our ancestral dust would already be scattered across the silent void. The ritual commenced not with a formal declaration, but with the Alpha lunging forward like a collapsed star. Selene reacted with the fluid mastery of 100 generations of light bending. She coalesced the ambient photons of the dying suns into a concentrated, razor-thin arc of pure thermal kinetic energy, driving the blinding construct directly at the creature's central mass. The impact should have sheared the beast in twain, turning its biology to vapor. Instead, the concentrated light simply sank into the black, rotting plates of the Alpha's armor, absorbed and nullified. Around my elevated adjudication podium, the collective bioluminescent glow of 80,000 ethereal spectators instantly dimmed from a vibrant, hopeful azure to a sickly, suffocating ash gray. Our secondary pulse nodes throbbed with the physiological manifestation of absolute despair. The Alpha swung a massive, weeping appendage, shattering Selene's defensive light shield and sending the High Exarch crashing into the ceremonial pillars. The monster did not offer her the dignity of a swift execution. It extended a dozen smaller, hooked tendrils, ensnaring her glowing limbs and hoisting her suspended above the shattered stone. The thick, necrotic vines began to pulse, physically siphoning the radiant bioenergy directly from her core. Her light flickered, plunging the arena into a deepening, terrifying gloom. As the senior adjudicator, I prepared to strike the final resonance bell, acknowledging our defeat and surrendering the planet to the swarm. Then, the rhythmic clinking stopped. I looked down from the high tiers to see the human deserter standing atop the balustrade, his hands gripping the ugly, rusted titanium bar. My profound, resigned despair instantly curdled into a jarring, visceral disgust. The sacred laws of the arena strictly forbade any outside interference during a species-leader duel, mandating that such a transgression would irrevocably pollute the honor of the entire civilization. The Voidrot armor was classified as an absolute density in our archival databases, a biological impossibility that repelled all known energy. No, it was an absolute density. The human just did not care about the governing laws of our physics. Silas Vane did not possess light-bending capabilities, nor did he possess the martial grace of the highborn. He possessed only a desperate, feral pragmatism born from a species that refused to die quietly. He vaulted the sacred crystalline barrier, plummeting 30 spans to the combat floor and rolling through the abrasive dust. The collective gasp of the ethereal crowd caused a brief, jagged spike of yellow bioluminescence to flare across the stands, a biological reaction of pure, unadulterated outrage. He was ruining our perfect, honorable extinction. The Alpha, sensing the chaotic, dense bioenergy signature of the mammalian intruder, swiveled its massive sensory clusters toward the charging human. It dropped the weakened High Exarch, allowing her to collapse against the fractured stone, and raised its primary crushing limbs to obliterate the fragile creature. Vane did not stop running. He sprinted directly into the shadow of the falling, mountain-sized appendage, dropping to his knees at the very last microsecond. He slid across the slick, blood-stained crystal, passing underneath the devastating strike just as it pulverized the floor where he had been standing an instant before. The sheer kinetic force of the Alpha's missed blow created a localized pressure wave that knocked the breath from my lungs, even high up in the adjudication tiers. Silas used his momentum to slide directly beneath the creature's central sensory cluster. Our warriors had always attacked the beast from the front, honoring the ritual of direct, equitable confrontation. The human, driven by the filthy doctrines of guerrilla tactics, recognized that honor was a luxury the dead could not afford. As he slid beneath the dripping, unguarded underbelly of the monstrosity, Silas kicked his boots upward, shattering a loose shard of arena crystal into the air. He swung the heavy titanium breaker bar like a crude kinetic hammer, striking the falling crystal shard with perfect, brutal geometry. The shattered glass accelerated to terminal velocity, burying itself deeply into the soft, unarmored neural gaps hidden between the Alpha's thick ventral plates. The beast released a sound that defied acoustic measurement, a screech of pure, agonizing static that caused my auditory canals to bleed a thin, luminescent fluid. The Alpha thrashed wildly, its absolute focus broken, leaving it totally blind to the tiny, filthy biped scrambling up its back. The Alpha roared, a vibration so dense it fractured the remaining pristine columns supporting the northern terraces, raining crystalline debris down upon the lower tiers. It twisted its colossal bulk, attempting to scrape the mammalian parasite from its armored dorsal ridge. Silas Vane clung to the jagged, rotting plates with bloody fingers, his thermal fabrics tearing against the abrasive hide as the beast bucked frantically. He was operating purely on the predatory instinct of his species, treating the massive creature not as a god to be fought, but as a hostile environment to be navigated. He crawled higher, hauling his battered body toward the cranial crest with agonizing slowness. Below him, High Exarch Selene dragged herself from the rubble, her bioluminescence flickering erratically as she prepared to channel her final reserves. Silas jammed his left arm deep into the exposed, weeping crevice he had just shattered open with the crystal shard. The Alpha convulsed, violently snapping its secondary appendages toward its own back in a desperate bid to dislodge him. Silas Vane stood atop the thrashing, mountain-sized monster, screaming for the High Exarch to fire her lethal energy beam directly at his chest to ensure the monster's armor remained breached. It was a request of utter lunacy. He was asking to be the focal point of a dying star. Selene hesitated for only a fraction of a heartbeat. She raised her glowing hands, coalescing every remaining photon in the arena into a blinding pillar of concentrated kinetic light, and fired directly at the human. The impact struck them both. The Alpha collapsed inward. It hit the arena floor with a seismic thud, its necrotic mass instantly cooling into inert, rotting slag. The human rolled off the carcass, his garments smoking, his skin blistered, but miraculously alive. A profound, collective exhale rippled through the 80,000 spectators. The suffocating tension evaporated into the cool, crystal-filtered air. Down on the floor, the microscopic, dying hum of the arena's energy regulators attempted to vent the residual heat of Selene's concentrated beam. We had survived. The ritual was complete. The shadow passing over the open apex of the dome seemed like nothing more than the natural dimming of our dying suns, a peaceful shroud settling over our hard-won victory. The sky broke. The orbital bombardment sirens shrieked, instantly drowning out the gentle hum of the regulators. The Void Nashus had never respected the sacred duel. A massive armada blotted out the dying suns, raining kinetic devastation upon our upper atmospheric tiers. The Alpha was not a solitary champion. It was merely a localized distraction meant to exhaust our High Exarch. My adjudication podium shuddered violently as ancestral stone pulverized around me. I stared upward, completely paralyzed by the sheer, unyielding scale of our true execution. We had survived the ritual only to be slaughtered in the aftermath. On the combat floor, the human refused to accept the inevitable. Silas Vane reached into his scorched garments and activated a modified, high-frequency distress beacon. Space itself tore open directly above the arena dome. A human fleet, brutal in its design and entirely devoid of aesthetic grace, translated straight into the atmosphere to establish a blistering defensive perimeter. But ships alone could not vaporize the encroaching rot. Silas staggered toward the weakened High Exarch, offering his scarred hand. He yelled over the deafening explosions, demanding a catalyst, proposing they use his dense, primitive biology as a terrestrial filter for her fading light. Celine grasped his palm. The synthesis protocol initiated. A biological feedback loop of that magnitude should have incinerated his nervous system in microseconds. Yet he absorbed the pure ethereal radiance, grounding the immense power through his mammalian heart. The wave of mutated, human-filtered light erupted toward the heavens, washing over the massive invading Voidnasha fleet and immediately dissolving their necrotic armor into harmless, floating ash, permanently breaking the siege through a violent, chaotic synergy that our rigid ancestors could never have predicted nor permitted. The silence returned, but it no longer felt like a tomb. Down on the fractured crystal floor, the dust settled over the cooling remains of the shattered world. Resting against the inert, ashen skull of the fallen Alpha lay the rusted titanium breaker bar. It was no longer a piece of kinetic scrap, nor merely the profane weapon of a filthy deserter. It was the physical key that had pried open the future.